Today, I want to be going through the steps that I take to turn one of my wildlife photos from this through to this. Everything we're going to be doing is inside Lightroom, but we are going to do a few adjustments inside Photoshop as well. But I want to talk you through my whole thought process and the little things I do to make your photos pop. So first up, we have this photo. This is by far one of my most favorite photos I've ever taken in my entire life. And I'm going to go through all the steps that I do to make this just come to life. The first thing I do with all of my wildlife photos is get rid of any distractions. What I mean by distractions are bits like this right here, these little dark bits, a little bit in the background here, a few little bits. You could say this path, but that path isn't too bad. But this fence right at the very back, that's a big problem. Now there's two different ways to get rid of them. First off, you could start in Lightroom. Lightroom is getting better at being able to do content-aware fill. Pretty much just wanting to clone stamp, delete, take things from one part of the image and suck it into somewhere else and make it look genuine and legitimate. The way to access this section is by pressing Q on your keyboard. What you can do is come up to this bandage section, or if you're American, Band-Aid, and then you have three tools available to you. The one I like more than anything is the first one, which is the Content Aware Removal tool. You can make the size of the selection larger or bigger using this here, or you can actually use the square brackets to make it larger and smaller. And then all you need to do is just brush over that area, give it a second, and it'll get rid of that for you. And then when you come out of that tool, you won't see that section at all. So with just them few steps, we've taken the image from looking like this to this, and we've done everything inside Lightroom. But the one thing that's really annoying about this photo is this fence in the background and this little box in the background. I don't know what it was, but this was done with the tiger inside an enclosure, a rather large enclosure, may I add. But obviously we can't get rid of that inside Lightroom because Lightroom, it just doesn't work for that kind of thing. So for this, we are going to have to go into Photoshop briefly. If you come down to the film roll, you can right click on the photo, come up to editing, and then edit in Adobe Photoshop 2023. Now, once you're in Photoshop, the first thing I like to do is duplicate the layer to make sure that I'm not doing anything destructive. I have something to fall back on should I make a mistake. To do that, just come down to the layer and press Command J. And then what we're going to do is just see how well Photoshop will get rid of that fence. So we're going to use the lasso tool, which is over on the left-hand side. We're going to select all of that fence area. We're going to make sure the feather is 0 and then press Shift and Backspace and make sure it's content aware and hit OK. And it's done an okay job. Not the best, but it's something which is workable. Now we're just going to use the clone stamp and get rid of areas which is missed to try and tidy it up. And at that stage, I'm pretty happy. I am going to get rid of some of the negative space at the top, so we don't need to worry about it being perfect. Once you've done that, hit Command S and that will save it back into Photoshop. And now we've taken the photo from the original raw file like this and got rid of all the distractions, so it's like this. At this stage, you just need to edit your photo like you normally would. Go through all of your exposure controls, your tone curve, your HSL, and get to the stage where you're happy with how the image looks in general. For most people, this is where you're happy. You'd export it, upload it to Instagram, and move on to the next one. But we're going to take this that extra step further, add that little bit of seasoning on top. And a lot of the special seasoning that I'm going to go into is actually from the masking. Masking just brings a photo to life. Now, obviously, a preset gets you so far, but I always say a preset is just like a basic grade. But there is so much more we can do with this photo with masking. One of the first things you can do with masking is actually noise reduction. Now, obviously, there's a few different ways you can get rid of noise in a photo. Obviously, you can do it using the noise reduction tool inside Lightroom, or you can send it through to a second program such as Topaz to be able to get rid of that. But if you just want to stick with the Lightroom, there are ways to just go that little bit further in noise reduction. This image doesn't really need it because it was shot at 800 ISO, but I'll show you because you may find it useful at some point. What you want to do is come over to the mask tool, click on background. What you can do is come down to the noise tool and drag it all the way to 100%. Let me just zoom in and show you that happening in real time. So this is before and after. It's only a minor thing on this photo because, as I say, we only shot 800 ISO, but if you're shooting on a longer lens in difficult situations, you will find yourself shooting in the thousands with ISO. It's a good tool to have in your arsenal. The next thing I really like doing in these photos is darkening the foreground at the feet of the tiger or the animal. To do that, we're going to come up to the mask tool again. What we're going to do is grab a linear gradient. We're just going to pull that up and let it just overlap the feet and the legs ever so slightly. And we're going to bring down the exposure a little bit first. We're going to add the contrast. And then what you can do is counter it ever so slightly if there's been any color shift using the white balance tool. So this has gone a little bit too warm in my opinion, so I will pull that back just a fraction into the blue. You can bring this a little higher, you can bring down the exposure a little bit more, tweak it as necessary. And just with that simple mask, you've taken that photo to the next level. At this stage, what you can do is just add more mask to it. So we're going to darken the top as well, almost create a vignette, but we want a little bit more control over the vignette to what you would normally have inside Lightroom. We can also select the whole subject. So if we select the whole subject, we can then add a little bit of contrast to the subject. We can also bring it up in exposure ever so slightly to let it separate from the background. Now you have to be really careful about how you do this because it can be very easy to separate your subject that little bit too much. So make sure you use it wisely. What we can also do is sharpen the subject that little bit more than we already have. So with the same mask still applied and selected, we can come down to the sharpness and increase the sharpness. Not too much because sharpness actually adds noise to the image, so you have to kind of balance it really subtly. And now once we're at this stage, we're gonna go even further and start looking at the tiger itself and bringing out certain features. One of the things that really sticks out to me on the tiger is the nose. This nose just here just needs brightening up ever so slightly. So what we're going to do is use the brush tool. So we're going to hit K. We're going to make this brush really, really small and just drag it in and paint a little bit of light in there. Once we've done that, we can just bring it up, add a little bit of saturation if we want. And I've just noticed by doing that, we've added a little bit of blue down here in the shadow. So we're going to come over to that brush. We're going to hit the negative and then bring out another brush. And we're just going to paint in, or paint out technically, a little bit of that mask which we added. The most important thing I feel when it comes to wildlife photography is the eyes. The eyes of an animal are so important when it comes to photography, especially because a lot of animals have really dark eyes. You want them to stand out. And especially in this photo, we want the eyes of the tiger to be literally watching you. So the way we're going to do that is by, again, using masks. We're going to use the brush tool and we're going to zoom in a large amount. We're going to make the brush really, really small and just paint in on the iris. And we can increase the exposure. We can also increase the saturation, but when we do that, you can see that they're really yellow and it's adding a little bit of blue on the left eye rather than the actual yellow which we want. So we're going to take the saturation back down to 0 and we're going to use the color tool to add some color of our choice. So we're going to go with the orange theme again. We're going to find a hue of orange that we like and adjust the saturation to suit. Once we're happy with that, we can come back into the exposure. We can adjust things to make it look more natural. And straight away, if I disable the masks, and I turn it back on, you can see the huge difference that masks add to a photo. Now these steps obviously at this moment in time are very specific to this photo, but they can be applied to many other photos out there. For instance, this photo here of a bird, this is without any masks. You can add a gradient mask at the top to add a little bit of brightness. You could add a little bit of darkness towards the bottom. But again, one of the most important things is the eye. So we're going to quickly paint that in right now. So grab the brush tool. We're going to grab the catch light, which is already there. It just needs enhancing that little bit more. We're going to increase the exposure. We're going to counter it because at the minute it's really blue. So we're going to add a little bit of warmth to it to make it more white. Zoom out, and then you can use the amount slider to adjust that to suit whatever you feel is necessary for that photo. But going in depth into each photo, getting rid of distractions, working on the masks, allows you to truly make your photos come to life and pop out of the screen or out of the print if you decide to print it and display it on your wall. And that is it for me today. Thank you very, very much for joining me. If you want to see more content like this about photo editing or video or cameras in general, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you do, I will see you right there in the next one. Thanks for joining me and have a great day.